Harry Potter's first year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry was very eventful indeed. Along with his friends Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger, Harry had managed to defeat Lord Voldemort, the greatest dark sorcerer of all time. But now Harry was back at number 4 Privet Drive. He was often locked in his room, and even though he was a wizard, he couldn't escape because he wasn't allowed to use magic. Then, one evening towards the end of the summer holidays, a house elf named Dobby appeared. Dobby warned Harry not to return to Hogwarts.
Harry Potter must not go back to Hogwarts. If Harry Potter goes back, he will be in mortal danger. There is a plot, Harry Potter, a plot to make most terrible things happen.
Dobby disappeared, and shortly after, Ron Weasley and his brothers Fred and George arrived in a flying Ford Anglia to rescue Harry from his prison. Harry told them all about Dobby's warning.
Very fishy. I reckon old Dobby was sent as someone's idea of a joke. Can you think of anyone at school with a grudge against you?
Draco Malfoy.
Eventually, they landed at Ron's house, the Burrow.
Touchdown!
Ron's mother, Molly Weasley, marched across the yard and came to a halt in front of them. She didn't look pleased.
Bed's empty, no note, car gone. Out of my mind with worry.
It seemed to go on for hours, and Mrs. Weasley had shouted herself hoarse before she turned to Harry.
Very pleased to see you, Harry, dear. Ronald Weasley, I thought I asked you to stop that ghoul from making such a racket. He's still dropping pipes over the attic floor. It's driving me mad.
Come on, Harry, let's go.
And they did. Harry had no idea where he was. All he could tell was that he wasn't in Diagon Alley. Evil-looking masks stared down from the wall, and rusty spiked instruments hung from the ceiling.
The sooner I get out of here, the better.
Harry heard a noise from the door nearby, and 2 blurry shapes appeared on the other side of the glass. Harry looked quickly around and spotted a large black cabinet. He shot inside it and pulled the doors closed, leaving a small crack to peer through. Seconds later, a bell clanged, and Draco Malfoy stepped into the shop. The man who was with Draco could only be his father, Lucius Malfoy.
Touch nothing, Draco.
Mr. Malfoy was trying to sell the shopkeeper certain dark magical items that he didn't want the Ministry of Magic to find out about. Harry went to Flourish and Blots to buy his books. While he was in there, Gilderoy Lockhart, Hogwarts' new defense against the dark arts teacher, was signing his latest book.
Nice big smile, Harry. Together you and I were at the front page.
Harry met up with Ron and Ginny Weasley. Lucius and Draco Malfoy were also there.
Famous Harry Potter. Can't even go into a bookshop without making the front page.
Ginny, who was very fond of Harry, defended him.
Leave him alone. He didn't want all that.
Lucius Malfoy insulted the scruffy state of the second-hand books Ginny had bought.
I suppose those books are the best your father can give you.
Lucius plucked a copy of A Beginner's Guide to Transformation from Ginny's cauldron, examined it briefly, and then replaced it. No one at that time realized how much of an effect this gesture from Lucius Malfoy would have on their lives, and they all left the shop none the wiser. They found the car in Charing Cross Road, and after making it invisible, flew it into the sky over London. They saw the Hogwarts Express far below, and followed it for some time. By the time Harry and Ron had escaped from the Whomping Willow, the sorting ceremony had already begun. They peered in at the Great Hall and watched as the aged-old sorting hat placed new students into the 4 Hogwarts houses, as it had for so many years past. Harry remembered putting the sorting hat on a year ago, and for a few horrible seconds he had feared the hat was going to put him into Slytherin, along with Draco Malfoy.
Not Slytherin, eh? Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor!
But of course, he had ended up in Gryffindor, along with Ron and Hermione. As they watched the sorting, Harry noticed that at least one teacher was missing from the staff table.
Hang on, where's Snape?
And then, from behind him came the voice Harry dreaded to hear. It was Professor Snape, Harry's least favorite teacher.
I'm waiting to hear why you two didn't arrive on the school train.
It was a great start to the term, thought Harry, as they followed Snape to his office. Once there, Snape nastily admonished them about flying the car to Hogwarts.
You will go immediately to your common room, and I will think about how to punish you.
The voice was growing fainter, and Harry was sure it was moving away, moving upwards. He began to run, his stomach lurching. Something was shining on the wall ahead. Harry approached slowly, squinting through the darkness. Mrs. Norris, Filch's cat, was hanging by her tail from a torch bracket. She was as stiff as a board, her eyes wide and staring. Foot-high words had been daubed on the wall above the petrified cat. Harry shuddered as he read them.
The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware.
Before Harry could leave, several people appeared in the corridor. When Filch saw Mrs. Norris, he screeched accusingly at Harry.
You've murdered my cat! You've killed her!
And then Draco Malfoy shouted out to everyone gathered.
Enemies of the air, beware. You'll be next, mudbloods.
Professor Dumbledore calmed everyone down and sent them all to bed. Ron reckoned that he had an idea who the heir of Slytherin was, and both he and Harry went to meet Hermione in the library. Harry's arm was hanging at a very strange angle, but in his good hand he held the snitch.
Aha, we've won!
Lockhart told Harry to lie back as he tried to mend his arm with a charm. A strange and unpleasant sensation started at his shoulder and spread all the way down to his fingertips. His arm didn't hurt anymore, nor did it feel remotely like an arm.
Ah, yes. Well, that can sometimes happen. So, Harry, just toddle up to the hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey will be able to, tidy you up a bit.
The next moment, Dumbledore and McGonagall were backing into the room, carrying what looked like a statue. Together, they heaved it onto a bed.
It means that the Chamber of Secrets is indeed open again.
Hermione whispered to Harry that it was about time he collected together the ingredients for the polyjuice potion.
As soon as your arm is better, I think you should go to Diagon Alley.
It was half-term by the time Harry's arm was better, and following Hermione's advice, he caught the train to London. Harry met Hagrid in Diagon Alley. Hissing furiously, the snake slithered towards Justin Finch-Fletchley. "Leave him alone," Harry shouted. At least, that was what he thought he'd shouted. When he looked up at Justin, he was met with an angry look.
What do you think you're playing at?
The snake was lying slumped on the floor, docile as a thick black garden hose. So why was Justin, and everybody else for that matter, regarding him with a look of horror?
You're a Parselmouth, Harry. Why didn't you tell us?
Harry didn't know what a Parselmouth was, so Ron told him.
You can talk to snakes, Harry!
Hermione informed Harry that being able to talk to snakes was what Salazar Slytherin was famous for, and how the whole school was now going to think that he, Harry Potter, was the heir of Slytherin, and therefore responsible for the attacks. Dumbledore wasn't in his office when Harry got there. It was a very interesting room, however, and nearby Harry spotted the sorting hat. As he approached it, the hat spoke to him.
You've been wondering whether I put you in the right house, but I stand by what I said before. You would have done well in Slytherin.
Harry's heart plummeted. He told the hat he thought it was wrong, and then a strange gagging noise behind him made him wheel around. Harry yelled in shock as the bird burst into flames, only to emerge from the fire more beautiful than it was before. Then the office door opened, and Dumbledore came in.
Fawkes the Phoenix is really very handsome, isn't he, Harry?
Harry nodded, still shocked by the sight of the bird bursting into flames. Dumbledore explained how phoenixes were fascinating creatures.
They can carry immensely heavy loads, and they make highly faithful pets.
Dumbledore went on to say that he didn't believe Harry was the attacker plaguing Hogwarts, and he asked if Harry had anything that he wanted to tell him. Harry thought of the disembodied voice he'd heard and his growing dread that he was connected to Salazar Slytherin, but in the end he didn't want to say anything about them. Harry flicked through the blank pages of the diary. Then he pulled out a bottle of scarlet ink, dipped his quill into it, and dropped a blot onto the first page. Excited, Harry loaded up his quill and wrote, "My name is Harry Potter." Then at last something happened. Oozing back out of the page came words Harry had never written. Harry nearly upset his ink bottle, and then more words appeared on the page.
I know all about the Chamber of Secrets. 50 years ago, the chamber was opened and a girl was killed. I caught the person who opened the chamber all those years ago.
Harry paused for a second and then wrote 2 letters. O.K. The pages of the diary began to blow as though caught in a high wind, and then the diary seemed to open up, and Harry was pitched headfirst into the opening. Harry saw that he was standing in a corridor in Hogwarts dungeons. Peering through a crack made by an open door was a boy of about 16. Harry knew at once that this was Tom Riddle, the owner of the diary. Then Harry heard someone speaking in a low whisper.
"Come on, gotta get you out of here. Come on now, in the box."
The voice definitely belonged to Hagrid, who, Harry now saw, was crouching down in front of a large box. Riddle suddenly stepped out from the doorway.
Evening, Rubeus. It's all over. I'm going to have to turn you in. The least Hogwarts can do is make sure the thing that killed that girl is slaughtered.
The young Hagrid rose up to his full height and roared at the top of his voice.
"It wasn't him! He wouldn't! He never!"
And then, from out of the box came something that made Harry let out a long, piercing scream unheard by anyone. A vast, low-slung, hairy body and a tangle of black legs, a gleam of many eyes and a pair of razor-sharp pincers. The thing scuttled away, tearing up the corridor and out of sight.
No!
The scene whirled, the darkness became complete, and Harry landed with a crash. Later, Harry met up with Ron and Hermione.
What's up?
Harry could barely get the words out of his mouth.
It was Hagrid, Ron! Hagrid opened the Chamber of Secrets 50 years ago!
The car screeched to a halt, and Harry dived inside.
Hurry up, Ron!
The door slammed shut, and Ron didn't need to touch the accelerator because the car was already speeding away. They sped out of the hollow, branches whipping the windows as the car wound its way cleverly through the widest gaps, following a path it obviously knew. After 10 noisy, rocky minutes, the trees thinned and the car stopped so suddenly they were nearly thrown through the windscreen. They had reached the edge of the forest. Harry and Ron arrived safely back in the Gryffindor common room.
What was the point of going in there? What have we found out? I'd like to know. That Hagrid never opened the Chamber of Secrets. He was innocent.
There was silence. Silence except for the steady drip-drip of ink still oozing from the diary. The basilisk venom had burnt a sizzling hole right through it. Shaking all over, Harry pulled himself up. His head was spinning as though he'd travelled miles by flue powder. Ginny drew a great shuddering gasp.
It was me, Harry, but I swear I didn't mean to. Riddle made me. He took me over.
Harry told her that it was all right, that Riddle and the basilisk were finished.
Come on, Ginny, let's get out of here.
They were flying upwards, and before he'd stopped enjoying the ride, it was over. All three of them were hitting the wet floor of Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Harry told them everything. He told them about hearing the disembodied voice, how Hermione had finally realized that he was hearing a basilisk in the pipes, how Aragog had told him where the last victim of the basilisk had died, how he had guessed that Moaning Myrtle had been the victim, and that the entrance to the basilisk's lair, the Chamber of Secrets, might be in her bathroom. Professor Dumbledore explained that 50 years ago, Lord Voldemort, as a 16-year-old Tom Riddle, had enchanted his diary, and that diary had enchanted Ginny. Later, Harry managed to release Dobby from the slavery of Lucius Malfoy, for it was Lucius Malfoy who had planted Tom Riddle's diary on the hapless Ginny Weasley. And as for Harry, well, once again he truly was the boy who lived.